So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the ADHD Reframed project with me, host Emma Craven. And today I'm joined by Keira. So, Keira, would you like to just do a little bit of an introduction to yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Thanks for hosting me today. It's lovely to be here. My name's Keira Smith, and I'm a solution focused hypnotherapist. And I do a lot of work with neurodiverse clients, particularly clients with ADHD and ADHD, to help them cope better with their lifestyle. With that neurodiversity, rather than seeing it as something to be solved, helping them lean into their skills, helping them cope better, and make better decisions around the issues that they're having, so that they begin their journey with me, and then they can take those skills on and continue them. They begin to snowball, and things get easier in their life.
I think I should probably do with a bit of your help. Technology, most of the listeners know by now that technology is not my friend, and yeah, we've had a bit of a few jump barriers to jump through just to get here today, haven't we, Kira?
Is it,
Double booking last week, and it's just
we have,
yeah,
but we're here now, and we're on Zoom,
exactly.
where we both feel comfortable on Zoom. So
Zoom is great. I love Zoom. It's so easy to use.
it is.
So do you have a diagnosis? Do you want to talk through your diagnosis if you do?
I don't have a diagnosis myself. My husband has ADHD.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, I work with a lot of neurodiverse clients. It's something I'm very comfortable working with. I've become very comfortable with it both through professional experience and through living with my husband's journey with ADHD and helping him cope better with it. So I have both personal and professional up close experience of it. And it's something I enjoy working with. I enjoy helping people let themselves off the hook and acknowledge that they don't have to shove themselves into a space that they don't fit in. It's not a problem. It's just doing things differently. It's like one of my supervisors always says, it's just like some people use Apple and some people use Android, and we shouldn't try and use an Android app on an Apple phone because it's not going to work. And that's all neurodiversity is.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. I couldn't have thought of a better analogy than
She's
that,
very good.
actually.
She's very good at thinking of things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. So what has been your experience? You don't have to talk about your husband too much, but how
That's
has it
fine.
been sort of being a partner or a wife to an ADHD husband? Did you say it
Yes,
was your husband? Are you married?
yeah, he is my
Okay, I
husband.
better
Thanks,
yeah, I
thank
better
you, Emma.
double check.
Thanks for asking. Yes, he is my husband. And prior to me doing this job, things were really, really difficult because we were butting heads about everything. I didn't understand him. He didn't understand himself. I'm wondering why. To be honest, Emma, I thought some of his behavior was attention seeking. I thought he just was disorganized. I thought sometimes he was just being an idiot and being arrogant. All of these things that when we don't know that someone has a neurodiversity and we don't have much knowledge about neurodiversity ourselves, we don't have the patience, we don't have the compassion. And I look back on that period now, which was sort of it got really bad on the lead up to lockdown, and then we sort of had the pressure was taken off during lockdown because things changed. But I look on that period, I feel really, really sad. I feel really, really sad for both of us, and it makes me feel really, really sad for all the other couples in the world who haven't had the the joy of the discoveries that we've had to enable them to stay together and be a happy couple. I do know that neurodiversity can break up a lot of relationships because if you don't have the understanding and that person doesn't have the understanding and acceptance, that can be really, really difficult. And then when I began working as a solution focused hypnotherapist, because we're dealing with neuroscience, I started to learn more about the brain generally, which was really useful for him. And then through listening to podcasts, he came to the conclusion, I think I've got ADHD. And then everything started to make sense for him. And I started to learn more through my job about ADHD. And the two things started to come together. And it was just wonderful because I felt less stressed, he felt less stressed. I was helping him cope, and I was able to put in a framework in our lives that enabled us both to feel so much happier, but for him to also really start to embrace the skills that come along with ADHD, because they are amazing and they're skills I don't have, and they're really useful in our life, actually. So it's been a really beautiful journey of discovery, and he really likes those aspects about himself now, because he absolutely should do. You know, some people will say, "Oh God, I feel like my brain's attacking me," but actually he works in a practical job. He's an electrician, which suits ADHD really, really well. Tons of dopamine all day long. He absolutely loves it. And it's allowed him to just match things to his own needs now, rather than trying to do things the way that just won't work for him.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many things that you just said then. I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the misunderstanding and obviously being late diagnosed and not really kind of not there hasn't always been a lot of information
Yes.
around adult ADHD diagnoses or even symptoms. And I think, yeah, the misunderstanding, I can't remember a few other things that you said, the problems that you had, but yeah, I think for me, like before I was diagnosed and before I really understood like how I say my ADHD manifests, so how my symptoms
Yes.
turn up daily for me.
Yeah.
Is how I would
Yes.
say that. And I think since I started studying psychology, I've just been, I'm obsessed with ADHD and I kind of
Yeah.
talk about it and research it all the time. But I think, you know, when I was younger, I was very impulsive. I've been told so many times, even as an adult, that I can be very selfish, very
Mm.
self-centered, and I always have to have the last word. And there's lots of experiences, unfortunately, that happened before I was diagnosed and before I really understood how
Yeah.
my ADHD is, that
Yes.
there's lots of kind of negative conditioning, they call it in psychology. I
Mm.
had a lot of like, operant conditioning and stuff like that. And it really kind of, it, it's, it was difficult to manage, because it's like,
Absolutely.
because I didn't understand what was going on, and I couldn't explain to people then, like, why I did things differently, why I left everything to the last minute, why I can't answer a question with a yes or no. I have to
Yeah.
give you the full backstory. There's all these things. Why am I time blind? Why can't I plan? Why can't I turn up on time? Why can't, and it's like, why? And I didn't understand until I was diagnosed. And it's like I was diagnosed in 2019 and I was age 43, and
Mm.
it was such an emotional kind of experience, but in a good way
Absolutely.
because
Well, there can be a real sense of grief. It is a grief. You know, it's just like, when I kind of acknowledged that I had, and still do to a certain extent, complex PTSD. There's a grief
Mm.
that all those things that you've gone through, that you weren't mad. There was a reason why those things happened. So there's absolutely, and I talk to a lot of clients, Emma, who they're coming to terms with it. They're coming to terms with that diagnosis, not because they don't, because sad that they have ADHD, but they're sad that they weren't able to know that before. And that's a huge grief. Absolutely.
And that's why these conversations are so important, aren't they? Because we can kind of highlight these experiences and kind of just say that, it is a grieving process.
It is.
And exactly for me, that was the reason why I didn't feel sad for myself because I've got ADHD. I felt sad because I wasn't diagnosed until I was
Yeah,
43. And
exactly. And all that time you could have spent leaning into it, you were trying to lean out of it. And that's the sadness, isn't it? That's the real sadness. Because now we know that an ADHD brain, just like an autistic brain, is simply a brain type that we developed when we were cave people, because we would have needed those people. You know, we desperately needed people, um, for instance, ADHD, someone who can spot everything, who can move very quickly from task to task, and can notice everything, or can hyper focus in on something. They would have been the hunters and gatherers. They would have been out feeding us, and it's not. it's just simply a brain type, and the world how it's constructed now is the issue, not the people in it. And that's where the sadness can really come in of like, we don't all need to be the same. And finally, we're acknowledging that.
Yeah. So how would you kind of support a client that's come to you and they need help? Let's make a little scenario up. So
Yes.
they've just been diagnosed.
Yes.
They have young children to cope
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
um, who were also diagnosed. They are struggling with managing kind of their daily lives because the executive function in their brain's not working and they're feeling really overwhelmed and really stressed.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through, your approach to that, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Emma. So the first thing that happens with my clients is they come to me for an initial consultation. And this is where they give me all the information they need to give me, as you just have. So I understand their lifestyle, because understanding someone's lifestyle is really key, because we're not looking for some to through because it's a solution focused process. We're helping the client find solutions rather than me just tell them what to do, because you're the expert on you and you know what works best. So I want to understand your lifestyle. I want to know if you have any other health conditions that we want to take into consideration, medications, because they can affect sleep, and obviously ADHD itself can vastly affect sleep. So we get all that information. I get all that information, give that person a chance to explain who they are and why they've come to me and what the reasons are, so that I understand all of that. And then the second part of that process, and this is for everybody, not just ADHD clients, but of course, when I'm explaining it to somebody with ADHD, I can make this more pertinent to an ADHD brain. I explain the brain, or the parts of the brain that we focus on as solution focused hypnotherapists. And for instance, with somebody with ADHD, I would do that in very small chunks. I would give them a chance to ask questions at any point. I would make sure there are plenty of fidget toys available, ask them if they needed a break at any point. Break it into chunks and make sure it's easy for that person to understand. And also ask them, what's your learning style? What do you find easy? What are your challenges when you're trying to learn? So that I can then, going forward, try and make that fit in as well as possible. And although it's a therapy session, we're never looking for people to sit still. We're looking for people to do whatever they need to do to concentrate and make it easy for them to take part. So even though when we move on to our proper sessions, the last part of our session is deep relaxation, trance. It's where, but they don't need to sit still for that. They can fidget all the way through that if they need to. If they need to stand up, they need to open their eyes. So we always embed it from the very first session with somebody with ADHD. We are not asking you to pretend you need to keep still, or we don't want you to keep still all the time. We want you to do whatever you need to do to focus. The other thing that I do though as well, Emma, is I'm very conscious of setting very firm boundaries with neurodiverse clients, because it's like, you can do all this stuff, but we have to stay within these lines, because as I'm sure you can understand, neurotypical people can end up chasing neurodiverse people around, and that doesn't help either of us. It doesn't help the process. So there's lots of scope within that process, but we set those firm boundaries so that we need to, because for instance, with one of my ADHD clients, they'll try and question it at every point and go, yeah, I've fixed that now, I'm on to the next thing. But in order for our process to work, we have to do some of the sticking with it and some of the keeping going. So we kind of set that groundwork. We're like, you can do all of this, but you have to stay within these lines. This is how we're going to work. And it's nice because I had one ADHD client who came to me and he said, I've never actually stayed engaged for that long. He said, usually I would have had to get up and leave. So
Yeah.
it was nice because we worked together, and that's really, really important to set those foundations. So because we're solution focused, from that point onwards, Emma, we move on to a solution focused approach. So we don't talk about the past anymore. Now, that's all been explained to the client within the brain explanation, because we don't talk about the past, because we don't want your brain to just keep reliving it. We don't want to reinforce those neural pathways, and we want to move towards your preferred future. So for the client that you described, they've got a lot going on. If we
Yeah.
sit and talk about those issues over and over again, your adrenaline will go sky high, your cortisol will go sky high, and you will go into what we call the fight flight brain. So earlier on, Emma, when like we were trying to coordinate the getting together on Zoom and all the platforms were against us, you said, when I'm panicking, I find it so much more difficult to do things. So we explained to the client, when your anxiety levels rise, you go into that fight flight brain, your vision narrows, you go for quick fix coping mechanisms, and you don't have access to your library of information. So that's what we focus on bringing the client away from. So once we move on to our proper sessions, so first of all, with the client you described, we want to help her improve her sleep. And that's something we do for everybody. But with ADHD, it's a particular challenge. It can be. My husband struggled for years with appalling sleep, like really, really bad. Um, so what we provide the client with is a relaxation to listen to before, as they're going to sleep at night. This helps them make the most of the sleep they're getting. We're not saying, right, you have to lock your kids in a room all night so you can get a decent night's sleep. We're looking to help them get the most out of the pockets of relaxation and sleep that they have. And we might even suggest that maybe they stick that on for the kids as well, because, it can be used for kids, it can be used for adults, and it can also be used during the day so that, you can get together with your kids and do it as a thing. But the lovely thing is, for people with ADHD, they don't have to sit still while they listen to that relaxation. Kids can be
Mm.
wandering around, they can be doing their Lego, not on a tablet or anything like that, but they could be playing, they can be colouring. So when my kid clients or adult clients come to my sessions, I always say that as well. You need to doodle, you need to draw, you do what you need to do. You just let that relaxation just wash over you. And then going forward, what I would do is I get my clients to write down in between each session what has been good, what they've been proud of, what's been different. So we're refocusing the brain constantly, like cementing those neural pathways into the rational part of the brain where you can cope best with whatever challenge you have. But particularly for someone with ADHD, they want to spend as much time in that brain as possible and get those little windows of focus, because that's where we focus best and that's where we can make better decisions. So we can make better choices, which ultimately mean our stress levels go down. So for the client you described, we then after we've talked about what's been good in the session, so you'd bring your what's been goods to the session and we'd talk about that for about 20 minutes, being
Mhm.
very careful to stay away from any negatives or turning a positive into a negative. We then move on to a problem solving tool, and this is extremely useful for ADHDers because we can take whatever's bugging them, whatever they're finding difficult, and we break it right down into the tiniest little first step. The smallest, tiniest little thing. So, for a lot of people with ADHD, that will be setting a reminder on their
Yep.
phone to remind them. It'll be setting a reminder to write a list. It'll be setting a reminder, or it'll be something very, very visual that they want to go home and they want to brainstorm something. Or it'll be something they know will give them a nice little chunk of dopamine that's going to obviously raise that dopamine level for them. And then for the last part of the session, that's when we do our deep relaxation. So that's when we say, right, you've done the work. Now let's cement it in the brain. And you're also going to get a chance to rest because, as you know, Emma, ADHD can be absolutely exhausting.
Yep.
So, for some people with ADHD that come to me, they will fall asleep during that time because they'll have had such a mad, busy day, their brain going nuts. It's a really nice chance to just let go and relax. And I had one client with ADHD who was a very high up police officer. And he said the only time his brain had felt as calm as when it so when he relaxed in my sessions, he felt really, really calm during that relaxation. He said the only other time he could remember feeling that level of zen, calmness, was driving 120 miles up the motorway to a murder scene. Now, that shows the level of dopamine his brain needed in order to feel calm. So, just doing the relaxation was a real light bulb moment for him of how much dopamine he's going to need to provide himself with to get to a state where he feels calm and at ease. And never mind other people going, "You're doing too much. You need to sit down and relax." That's not how he relaxed. His relaxation was giving himself lots and lots and lots and lots of activities that gave him lots of dopamine. The other thing we really get people to focus on, ADHDers to focus on during my sessions, is getting the right type of dopamine. So we have two different types of dopamine, and I'll go back to my amazing supervisor, Claire Noyle, and her description of slutty dopamine and classy dopamine. So we've got
Okay.
slutty dopamine, which is a little bit like your pick and mix of dopamine. You know, it's like you're eating a bag of pick and mix. It makes you feel a bit sick, but you keep doing it. Doom scrolling on your phone, you know, playing a game for ages. It doesn't really make you feel good, but for particularly for someone with ADHD, their brain will try and mine that, mine it, mine it, mine it, mine it, mine it, and they could be doing it for hours because their brain is just craving that dopamine. Whereas if we can provide it with classy dopamine instead of slutty dopamine, this is like the roast dinner of dopamine. This
Oh,
is where,
lovely.
this is where we get that, you know, long-term projects, which for someone with ADHD, they can hyper focus in on. They can spend hours doing something which provides them with tons and tons and tons of dopamine, which makes their brain feel really relaxed. So you know, as a neurotypical person, you can be looking on at someone with ADHD and thinking, wow, they're a machine. They've been doing that for hours, but they are in that lovely, lovely flow. And when they come away from it, their brain is no longer seeking that dopamine, and they can sit down and they can actually take part in family activities and they can engage properly. So with an ADHD, it's so important we focus dopamine, dopamine. What gives you dopamine? For one client I had, it was going to racetracks and booking in to drive really fast cars, you know, and he would get out and be physically shaking, but he would go home and he would sleep like a baby.
Mhm.
And it's that kind of light bulb moment of, oh, this is what I need. Never mind anybody else. This is what fills my dopamine bucket up. And this is what makes me feel good and therefore makes me feel more relaxed and therefore more able to take part in family life, make better decisions, put in frameworks that actually help support me with organization. And that's what's really, really lovely. The other thing that sometimes ADHDers come to me with is learning how to manage their meds, because sometimes they go on meds and it swings them to the other end of the scale, and that feels weird. It doesn't feel like them anymore. And so one chap I had, he came to me during his getting diagnosed, and then he came back to me when he got put on meds, and it helped him kind of figure out how much of his meds he actually needed to be, you know, bobbing along nicely, but not completely a totally different person, because
Yeah.
you don't want to be, because you're great as
No.
you are, you know. So
Yeah.
that was the other thing that helped him kind of figure out. In the end, it was 50% of a capsule tipped in a glass of water, and that suited him really, really well. So it's equipping ADHDers with that tool of educating them about their own brain and then asking them the right questions for them to find out what are the best sources of joy, of dopamine, of relaxation in their life. And just giving them little nuggets of neuroscience, things like you mentioned, why people with ADHD leave things till the last minute. And because their brain is lowering um, adrenaline and dopamine, like leaving things till the last minute gives them that massive push to get over the finish line. And it's again another thing, and you might relate to this, Emma, that people will have been criticized for in the past. You shouldn't leave things till the last minute. But actually, once they learn, actually, that's what my brain needs, and it does work for them because they're still high performing,
Yeah.
just do it, you know?
Yeah.
That's fine. So it's really helping them strip away all the stuff that's not useful for them. Never mind if it's useful for other people. Somebody said to me, "Oh, I'll use a spreadsheet to do that." I said, "Do you like spreadsheets?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, definitely don't do it then, because there's other frameworks you can use.
Yeah.
Frameworks that work for you." Yeah. So it's lovely. They're lovely clients to work with.
Very interesting as well. Yeah, I'm fascinated now. So hypnotherapy, I don't know a lot about it. So do you want to explain to me and the listeners what it is? Because yeah, you've got me fully engrossed in the conversation now. So I want to learn a bit more. So yeah, hypnotherapy, because I always thought that was like going to see someone lying down on the couch and they're gonna do something to you and put you into a trance and yeah, you see the things on TV. Was it Paul McKenna
Yeah.
or
Paul
whoever it was?
McKenna. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think
Yeah.
that's actually what you do day to day. So yeah, maybe just explain a little bit about what hypnotherapy is, please.
Sure. So there are loads of different types of hypnotherapy, Emma. So you've absolutely hit the nail on the head that some types are very much you go and they put you in a trance and they kind of ask you questions and things like that. With the solution focused hypnotherapy, it's very much an equal balance between the talk therapy part and then the deep relaxation. So, the talk therapy is, as we talked about, all solution focused, all talking about what's been good, what do you want to happen, when is that not a problem, how can we build more of that in, and then the bit that sort of people would traditionally think of as hypnotherapy is simply a deep relaxation. So no questions get asked during it. People will just let the words wash over them. And as I said, some people might drop off. Some people might sit there with their eyes open. Kids might be, one of my little clients with ADHD, he can be doing anything. He could be playing chess during it. He can be practicing his kickboxing. But by the end of it, he's yawning and he's saying, "Oh, that was nice. I like that one today." So it's just deep relaxation, and its technical name is trance. And this is a very normal, natural state the brain drops into every 7 minutes
Okay.
in order to catch up. Now, if our, as we call it, stress bucket is very, very full, our brain will drop into that catch up trance state more often. So, what we're doing by providing them a nice sort of half-hour chunk of that is really letting their brain do lots of processing, lots of catching up, allowing the cortisol to come down, the adrenaline to come down. And then when they go away from the session, they go away focused with a little bit of an action plan, a relaxed brain, and then they're sort of off, moving upwards, rather than having discussed all their problems, which will then just drag them back down with high cortisol and adrenaline. The big thing about solution focused hypnotherapy is it's all based on modern neuroscience. So,
Okay.
what's really nice about that is when somebody asks you a question, like for instance, why do I leave everything till the last minute? You're able to give them a neuroscientific answer. And they're able to then put little building blocks in of going, okay, well, that's how my brain works. So, those things are not going to work for me. And off they go, and they can then implement that little bit of information into their life. And the nice thing is we always follow the same structure. So we do our what's been good. We talk about that for 20 minutes ish. We do what's called the miracle question, which is our problem solving tool, which is so useful for someone with ADHD because we can go all around the houses and they can just go on loads of side quests. And then eventually we can cut it down and get to a nice actionable step. And then they can chill out and do that relaxation, but in the way they need to. And then we follow that process. And it's not a forever therapy, Emma. So people aren't coming to me for, if they want to come for years and years, things are only going to get better and better. But it's really, they come for sort of 8 to 12 sessions. They really get the nuts and bolts in place. They start to really zoom out and get a perspective on themselves. And then off they go with that knowledge and a couple of little science-based tools I've given them in place. And then the other tools they've started to gather for themselves.
Yeah, yeah, sounds amazing. I think, unfortunately, the older the person is when they're diagnosed, the more trauma they may have experienced. And I
Yes.
think the emotional dysregulation, RSD for me has been debilitating at times.
Yeah.
And just the emotional dysregulation because it's just, but a lot of the time I think like my emotions are just there and I don't realize they're coming. And I think
Yes.
that's been like a massive, so I think the scientific term is emotional hyperarousal,
Mm,
and we have no clue that we're gonna, the feelings or emotions are going to appear. And I
yes.
think, for me, that's been quite difficult to manage. So
Absolutely. That is a really, really huge thing, outbursts of anger, kind of very it's feeling like where has this come from? Why defiance? Defiance is a huge one for people with ADHD. Why can I not back away from this defiance? It's massive. And of course, the higher the anxiety levels are, the fuller that stress bucket is, the more you'll be in the fight flight brain. And when we're in the fight flight brain, we only have access to our primitive coping mechanisms and emotions, which are anger, anxiety, and depression slash avoidance. So, the big thing for helping with that emotional dysregulation is helping people move away from that brain as much as possible so that they can just gain some more control and perspective over those overwhelming moments that can just come. And I think for my husband, he was like, for years he felt quite emotionally sort of confused and numb and didn't really understand what those emotions were or why they were coming. So it's like you say, it can be incredibly overwhelming. But he said the biggest thing for him with me helping him with what I do is that ability to, at those moments, even if you have to literally speak to yourself out loud, is being able to just take a little step back or just having those few little things in place. Like for him, one of the things, if we're out and about and he's really struggling, a can of Coke is really useful. Bit of caffeine helps his brain bubble along nicely. And it's just feeling like he's got that really easy tool that he can get hold of. It's a little bit of comfort, a little bit of caffeine. And that's been a really big thing for him, starting to gather those little tools for those really overwhelming moments, like you say, of feeling. He said for him, he said he feels like his brain and his body are going in two different directions.
yeah.
And he just something where he can take a second and just let them start to come back together and do something like have sit and have a can of Coke or whatever it is.
Yeah. And I love that self-regulation and co-regulation as well. Like my partner for me, like I think he can almost, because he doesn't have ADHD. He's definitely autistic, but he's not
Mm.
diagnosed. So yeah, we have had a few kind of conversations that we've had, and he's needed to kind of, like you have, like fully understand what ADHD is and, and how my symptoms manifest. And, we've had conversations, and yeah, now he's my co-regulator. So if I feel myself getting really, really overwhelmed, because I've also got complex PTSD as well,
Right, so you've
and
got that added on top. Yeah,
yeah, and
very
I've got
difficult.
fibro and I've got depression and I just all sorts. There's just all
Yeah,
sorts going on, and sometimes, like I'm gonna just say it as it is. I don't know my ass from my elbow.
yeah,
Like I don't know what's
yeah,
going on, and sometimes I just get to the point where I feel really overwhelmed, and I'll just go and sit with him, and we'll just sit together and
yes,
watch something on the telly, or we'll just talk, or but just that physical presence of sitting actually with him
yes,
on the sofa is what calms me down. And I think over, periods of times, I'm starting to recognize when I do need to do that more, like take a step
brilliant.
back,
Yeah.
from life, from family, from my daughter, or not from my daughter, like step away, but
No, but just give
just,
yourself that moment, which is
yes,
there's we don't need to be on all the time. You're absolutely right, Emma. I think it's another thing that we talk a lot about with my husband and my clients of you don't have to do all this on your own. That in the past there's been a lot of pressure of you need to get well for yourself and you need to do it all on your own. But that's not the case. We all need a hand and we all need help from wherever that comes. And I think you make a really, really good point there, Emma, about co-regulation. At times, my husband really struggled to know when he needed help, and then how to ask for it. And I said to him, all you need to say is, I need help, and I'll step in, because I know the ways that you might need help now, help making decision, help tidying the mess up from a project that you've been doing. You make such a good point, like co-regulation, it's so important. And that regulation of touch, a hug from someone, a 15-second hug is more powerful than an antidepressant. And I think you make a really, really good point. It's letting go of that, oh, if I ask for help, it's selfish, or if I take time away from my children, it's selfish. Absolutely not. Because you think about, a calm brain gets out of its own way. So if you can find any way that you can to be calm, it's a gift to everyone, not just you.
Yeah. And I think the more that even my daughter, she's 27 now, and she doesn't live at home anymore. She's a midwife at the local hospital. But I think even with her, she struggled with my ADHD, or she
Mm.
struggled with how I was before I was diagnosed. But then after I got diagnosed, obviously I had to learn about it and learn about my symptoms first, but as quite a few years ago now, maybe 3 or 4, started explaining the symptoms and why,
Yes.
because of the ADHD, why I do things in a certain way, or why I can't give her a yes or a no answer to, "Have
Yeah.
we got any more cat food?" It's a great example, and I use it all the time because it is literally like, and
Yeah.
she's very, very, very autistic, and she's definitely got ADHD. But ADHD, I meant not ADHD, but she doesn't think she has, but she does because I see it.
Yes. Yeah.
And whether she gets diagnosed or not is but she's more autistic than I would say ADHD, and she
Mm.
gets very impatient at times. And then if I can't answer, like, "Have we got any more cat food?" Well, the simple answer is no, but I can't just say, it's almost painful. It's almost physically painful for me to just say no,
Yeah.
because I have to. No, because whatever, whatever. But and I know at times that she's been really frustrated with that, or frustrated with me being late, or why I do things in a certain way, or and things like that. And I think the more that I've explained it to her, and the more that we've just spent time together on, like, just the two of us, and we've gone out for coffee, or we've done what mum and daughters do, because parenting adult children is so different to when they're younger. It's so different, and it's not talked about a lot. Or I
No.
don't see it being talked about a lot, and I think it's been really important for mine and my daughter's relationship, um, for her to just understand about
So
ADHD and what
much.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then it's since I started doing that, like, we have a much better. We didn't have a bad relationship before. Please don't, I don't want the listeners
Oh,
to
don't
think that.
please don't have to justify yourself. I completely understand, Emma. You'd right. It's just you then have more compassion for each other,
Yeah,
and understanding, and it just makes the world of difference because you know yourself how isolating it can be. People can become very, very isolated when they perhaps don't realize they have a neurodiversity, or they do, but they don't know how to ask for help, or they don't know how to explain. And it's really, really sad. So it's lovely to hear that, you and your daughter are just able to support each other better. It's
yeah.
lovely.
It's just having that understanding, and even if she never gets diagnosed with either autism or ADHD, at least she understands. In fact, a funny story is that she said to me, because I did a I'm studying psychology, and I did a module on personality and intelligence, um, and included ADHD.
Yes.
I include ADHD in every single assignment that I write.
Yes.
But and I did the genetics of personality. I had a choice between cultural influences or genetic influences. And then
Yes.
obviously doing that and kind of researching ADHD and her, genetics and stuff, it like 86% that your child, if you've got a parent, you could, there's an 86% that that gene is going to be passed on to your children or your children's children. It's not
Yeah.
always kind of directly. And
Yeah.
I said this to her. We were out for coffee one day and I said it to her and she went, if any of my kids have ADHD, they're coming to live with you. She was like, "I can't cope with one of you as a kid," and I was like she was laughing when she said it, but,
You
and her partner's mum's got ADHD, she's just been diagnosed in her 50s as well, so they've got it, like, double-barreled kind of when they have kids together, like, they've got 2 grandparents that have got it, so,
But at
yeah,
least
it's
they'll have so much more understanding by that
yeah,
point, and that makes their life and the child's life so much easier. And I think, for people like yourself and my husband who've had late realizations or diagnoses, it can have been a really interesting situation because, sometimes those people's parents have had a neurodiversity, but because it wasn't known as a neurodiversity at that point, and it was just kind of that behavior was reinforced as this is just how you behave. So the chaos or whatever it might be has never occurred to them that it might be a neurodiversity, that it might be a brain difference. And so when they get older and they suddenly go, oh my God, actually, oh, this is a
yeah,
difference. And this is something I need to behave differently towards myself because this isn't because that behavior had just been reinforced as kind of what you do. And then they come out into the world and they're like, oh, this doesn't quite fit. And then you just had to live with it for however long until you got your diagnoses, until you could understand yourself better. So you make a really good point that now, generations going forward, we're gonna have so much more understanding and will make those children's lives and the parents' lives so much easier.
yeah, and I think particularly for younger children, if I could do anything for anyone going forward, it would be to support or help late diagnosed adults, but also I think, to get that understanding in schools for
Yes,
children that are
big
younger,
time.
particularly, in a classroom where they've got peers that are neurotypical and they're neurodivergent. And it's just about getting that kind of understanding of why the behavior, why can't you sit still? Why do
Yes,
you do things in a certain way? And I think that's really important to kind of get their messages across and then get, young children's peers to understand them so then they weren't as disrupted or distracted in the classroom.
yeah.
And, I know that there's a lot of work to go, but it would be really nice to see something like that because I think it's really important. If I'd have had that, if I'd have understood and I'd been diagnosed earlier, my life obviously would be very different. But then again, I wouldn't be who I am sitting here now. So I don't know if I'd want to go back and be diagnosed early
Yeah, it's
or
always
not. It's
interesting.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is
yeah,
always interesting, but I think you're absolutely right, Emma, because there are some really simple changes that we can put in schools that could make teachers and pupils' lives a lot easier. And don't get me wrong, there are some schools that are being amazing and they're really working hard. I've got a friend who again has had late diagnosis of ADHD, and she runs networking events which are deliberately designed to be suitable for neurodiverse attendees because she is completely right in saying this. If they're suitable for neurodiverse people, neurotypical people will be fine because neurotypical people will just go along with the flow. And I think it's exactly the same for schools. Having it set up more for neurodiverse kids. Neurotypical kids will be absolutely fine in those environments. We don't need to worry about doing loads of separate things. I think if we just focus on it being suitable for um, neurodiverse kids, and having more space and having things like quiet spaces. And one of the children that I'm seeing as a client at the moment, there's always an option for him to go to. There's a separate desk if he needs to go and sit and do his work at a separate desk. He's always allowed all of his fidget toys out. Whereas the previous school, they were taking his fidget toys away from him for misbehaving He's misbehaving because he hasn't got the fidget toys. He needs the fidget toys to generate dopamine because his brain is low in dopamine. It's things like that. One tiny simple fact. He needs something to generate more dopamine to keep him calm. And if you're taking that away from him, what happened? He got very angry and he got very upset. And then, it snowballs from there, doesn't it? So you're totally right. Emphasis on those really um, simple things to put in place. And then everybody's so much happier.
Yeah, and it is a shame that, this is just slowly kind of taking off. Maybe it's educating people about what ADHD is and autism, or any other neurodivergence that comes under the neurodivergence umbrella. But I think, like in my experience since I started studying, I've noticed that, like, whenever there's these celebrations or whenever there's, like, you at my university do a lot of work around neurodiversity, and
Mm.
I've been to lots of events that they've done, and unfortunately I have noticed myself that ADHD is always kind of just gets lost.
Mm,
And I know there's people that are becoming more aware of it, but they know, they've heard of it, they don't really know exactly what it is or how
yes,
it kind of manifests. And then, unfortunately, like in these bigger celebrations or whatever happens, like ADHD gets mixed into everything, and then it's just kind of lost and nothing
yes,
kind of, which is why I wanted to do the podcast, why I set up the
yeah.
project. It's why I do the advocacy work I do within my university. It's why I do everything basically. Because unfortunately, I think, ADHD, either people have said to me, like, typical people have said to me so many times, like, but ADHD is the same as autism, isn't it?
Oh, they're so different. And then for people with ADHD, with both,
Yes.
we've got that real, I need space, I need to be with lots of people, I need quiet, I need constant noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're two very, very different neurodiversities.
Mm.
Very, very different, and, yeah, absolutely. You're completely right in that people are still misunderstanding what ADHD is, but also not making the most of the skills people with ADHD have. I know a lot of companies now are angling more towards how can we actually harness the power
Yeah.
of ADHD and autism, because there are loads of characteristics that a neurotypical person doesn't have, which is absolutely fantastic to hear. But it's like, somebody was telling me about in Germany, they will really, really look at the child as they come into secondary school and look at their strengths and go, you're a really practical person. You thrive in these environments. Let's get you learning how to lay bricks and learning how to wire a plug. And so, like my husband says, God, if he'd had that chance, he would have been a trade he would have, been qualified as an electrician 20 years previous to when he did,
Yeah.
and it would have ticked the boxes really, really well. And I do think we don't have that at the moment in workplaces, in schools. And like you say, people aren't understanding how they can make the most of someone's talents and skills that come with ADHD. And they don't really know. They just think it means someone's bouncing off the walls and they can't focus. Like I mentioned to somebody at a networking event that my husband had ADHD, and they said, "Isn't he an electrician? You should be careful who you tell that he's got ADHD if you're recommending him as an electrician." I was like, "But it's ideally suited for someone with ADHD." I said, "He's got the hyper focus. He works like a machine, really, really fast. His problem solving abilities are really, really quick. He can work out solutions that are really outside the box
Yeah.
compared to other people." And she was like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And that's still sadly really, really common.
That's case in point, isn't it? And that does make me feel really sad. And social media has had a bit of a Um, uh, like during COVID, like you said, during COVID, like ADHD, I think influencers and stuff exploded, and the awareness kind of
Mm,
took off during COVID. But unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of information that's on social media that is incorrect, or like
yeah,
there's clickbait, which drives
absolutely.
me insane because ADHD is horrific or ADHD is traumatic, and I'm just
Yes.
like, get a grip, because all you're doing is, by spreading that negative information, which sometimes it can be them things and it can be debilitating, but it's not that bad. Like having
Ex
cancer to
Yeah.
me is horrific.
Yes.
Having ADHD, yes, I have challenges, some days, most of the time, because I've learned, like you've said, I've learned how to harness it to my
Mm.
advantage. It it's not debilitating. It can be, but
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
and I just think, that's why I wanted to do the podcast, because I wanted to start focusing on like a strength-based approach and just reframing like that negative narrative into a positive one. So I'm really glad that you came today, because it's been fascinating to talk
Oh, thank you, Emma,
about this
because that
stuff. So
you say about the strength-based approach, that the solution-focused approach is that's how it helps neurodiverse people. It's how can you cope better? It's not how can we stop you having ADHD or how can we stop you having autism or, it's how can you cope better with what you have at the moment. Yes, it can be really shit, like you say, on days. And but what can we do about it? And that's the key thing that I love about my job. One of my ADHD clients said to me that attending sessions with me was the single most helpful thing he's ever done for his ADHD because it's action driven. It's not sitting and dwelling on things. It's action driven. Like what's your challenge this week? Right, let's break that down. Let's
yeah,
get a tiny little first action for you that you can move off and do. What's working for you at the moment? What isn't working for you? Let's scrap that if it's not working for you. Let's bring in more of the stuff that is. And that we all need that, but particularly for someone like yourself who's had a late diagnosis, will go, "Oh my God, I don't know. What do I do now? Like,
yeah,
how do I cope with this?" So I love it because, like I said, it's helping people let themselves off the hook. I don't need to be like that anymore. I don't need to be a square peg in a round hole. I can be me, but let's help you be the best version of you so that you can streamline your life and get the results you want from it.
yeah, and I love that, because it's only been through. I had some strength-based coaching through a lady that I met on LinkedIn, and she offered a grant, and I applied for the grant and completely forgot about it, but I was awarded it because I wouldn't have been able to afford it otherwise.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's through her strength-based coaching that I realised that I have got strengths, and
Yes,
like you do
lots
with
of
your
them.
clients, exactly, and like you do
Yeah.
with your clients, or we didn't dismiss the negatives. We didn't, they were there, and but it was more kind of like you do, solution focused. So, what are your strengths? How can you use your strengths in everyday life? How can you kind of harness
Yeah.
your natural ADHD strengths in a way that's going to be suitable to your advantage and to everyone else's advantage. You know, it-
Exactly. That's
and
it's so good to hear that you've had that experience, Emma. That's so good because I always make sure I say to my clients, this isn't toxic positivity. This is not pretending
yeah,
the problem doesn't exist, but it's doing that exactly as you said you've done with the strength-based coach. Okay, I'm really good at this. How can I use that more? So it's so nice to hear that you've had that experience and it's been so positive for you. That's brilliant.
I wouldn't have been doing this podcast now, because that was my goal. Like, she was like, she regularly used to say, like, what is one thing that you've always wanted to do, but you've never
Yeah.
had the confidence to do it? And I was
Yeah.
like, I want to start a podcast. I want to start talking. I want to start creating content.
Oh, brilliant.
And yeah, all that stuff. And here we are,
That's
my New Year's
amazing.
resolution.
Well done.
Yeah,
Congratulations, because that's
thank you.
fantastic. That's
Thank
so
you.
good.
And
Love
also
it.
as well, like I can't thank her enough, because it was like I during the whole process, it was like I found self-acceptance.
That's the most beautiful thing in life,
Yeah.
self-acceptance.
And
It opens the
obviously,
gate to everything else.
exactly. And obviously I do go into the negative panic sometimes, and the narrative in the head is sometimes negative, but the thing that I try to do is not hang on to that negativity and try and
Yeah.
think, okay, like, yes, I'm whatever's happened, like, yes, Riverside won't let us record, and then Teams won't let us, rather than kind of getting myself into a really, really, really bad state like I can do
Yeah,
sometimes, it's just like,
yeah.
when we eventually got into the Zoom, it was like, okay, so we're going to
You're
just take a
fine.
minute, yeah,
Yes,
just to calm myself down
yeah.
and, co-regulate with you, but also self-regulate and think, okay, that's done, because tech is never my friend.
Not nor
Um,
mine, nor mine. But it's
honestly,
even just giving your it can be as little as 10 seconds, 30 seconds of just sitting, and then you can access those bits that you need, and it's yeah, absolutely. It's
yeah,
it's it's really lovely to talk to you, and it's really lovely to hear that you've taken so much from that coaching, and it's really helping you put in this framework that's helping you achieve the things you want to achieve.
yeah. Yeah, and I can't thank the lady enough. Brilliantly diverse, strength-based coaching. Saskia is the lady's name, but I wouldn't be able to pronounce her surname.
Mm.
So I wouldn't try and pronounce it because I'm not good at pronouncing words. But yeah, if any of the listeners are interested, yeah, completely and utterly, like almost, yeah, changed my life. Like, I
Yeah,
began unmasking. Because it's exhausting if you're masking part of your
absolutely.
ADHD.
Yeah,
It's just exhausting, and what I've learned through that unmasking process, which sometimes is one step forward and 10 steps back, or, it's
yeah,
dependent on how you feel in the moment, what's going on around you, but I think people at staff at my university have said to me they learn more about ADHD when I unmask and just be myself,
yes.
and I go off on a million tangents and stuff, and it's like, it's almost teaching them more about what ADHD actually is, but it's also teaching other ADHDers that, it's okay to just be you, like,
Exactly, and
it's
then
so much growth.
other people can get the best from you. They know how to get the best from you then, and they know how to so that you'll be relaxed, they'll get the best from you, you'll both have a good experience. Yeah, absolutely. It does, you're giving people permission to, behave differently towards you, or for them to behave differently themselves, and it's very, very powerful when you do that. You let other people off the hook then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible because I've met students that are now friends that are transforming the way that they see themselves, and it's just a beautiful experience, I think, because I think it's so empowering, and you're giving yourself permission, but also you're helping other people to find their own permission to just be
Yeah.
themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more, Emma.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have thoroughly enjoyed meeting you, Kira, and talking to you today.
Me
I know
too.
there was a bit of mix up for last week, so I had to apologise a lot because I got double booked, and I don't even know what happened last week, but it
But
was
we
one
got
of them.
together today, and that's the
Exactly, yeah, and then
nice
today
thing
was the
about
problem with
it.
Riverside and then Teams and now in Zoom, and yeah, so I'm so glad that you had the patience with me, and you came this week again, even though I had to move the time. Um,
That's all right.
but
We got
we got
here.
here.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Yeah.
got here in the end. So
Brilliant.
yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, Kira, and I've thoroughly enjoyed listening about the work that you do and how important that is for my listeners. And I will put the link to do you have a website?
Yeah, I've got a website. My company's called positivechangehypnotherapy.co.uk. And then I'm on Instagram as Rewire to Thrive. And then I'm on Facebook just as Keira Smith. So you can connect with me on any of those, either of those social media platforms, or take a deeper dive on my website, and have a look. And please get in touch if you have any other questions.
I'm gonna have to look at your website now because I'm fascinated. I love it when anything is like a solution focus, like, yeah, I can sit and talk about what the bad things, but what am I going to do about it to make a step forward? So yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
have to go and have a deeper dive in your website
Oh,
so I can learn a
lovely.
bit more. But yeah, to the listeners, thank you for listening today. And the podcast is on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, and I can't remember the other ones now because my brain has just decided to
YouTube?
and yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I should have a list in front of me when I do an episode, yeah. YouTube, I do have a YouTube channel.
Brilliant.
So yeah, to the listeners, if you've, liked anything that we've talked about today, if anything relates, then, yeah, please do reach out in the comments on Spotify. Oh, no, I'm also on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and Instagram. The ADHD Reframed Project is also on there as well. And like you, I've also got a personal Facebook account and stuff. So yeah, it's been really nice. Um, anyway, it's been really nice to meet you, and thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you, Emma.
Um,
Thanks so much for having me.
it's been a pleasure. If there is one thing that you would like, um, someone with ADHD, whether they're self-diagnosed, diagnosed, waiting to be diagnosed, have been diagnosed, what is one bit of advice, or what one thing you'd like to say to them that may help them to move forward?
Mm. Don't wait until you get a diagnosis to start finding ways that you can cope better, and it doesn't matter if you never get that diagnosis. Like, I see clients who think they might have ADHD. I see clients who've been diagnosed. It really doesn't matter whether you do or you don't. Finding out what works for you now in the smallest possible, easiest way is the most empowering thing you can do. Taking away from today, I want listeners to think, when they're looking at a task that they're finding difficult, what's the very easiest starting point for me that will make this task as easy as possible to begin and do, disregarding what anybody else thinks they should do or what works for anybody else. You are the expert on you. Find the easiest, tiniest first step that works best for you.
Perfect. That's beautiful. Thank you. Because I do know, as an ADHD lady, that sometimes it's difficult to work out where to start because you're looking
Yeah.
at something as a big project, and you don't know which
Yes.
bit to start, and then you get like, I think they call it like procrastination paralysis.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the right words are for it,
Sort
but
of like
you know,
decision fatigue, really, isn't it, Emma? Where
yes,
it's
yeah,
so overwhelming. And that you make a really good point there. Like, for one of my clients that I'm seeing at the moment with ADHD, because people with ADHD can be so visual,
yeah,
writing a list and things that just might not work for you. But if she does a brainstorm, she draws a coloured cloud in the middle of the piece of paper, and then all these offshoots come off. That really works for her. So it's all about, like you say, what's working for me, because it can be really overwhelming to know where to start. What appeals to you? What feels like it would be easy? Is it writing a list? Is it talking to someone? Is it asking someone to help you start that task? You know, really thinking about what resonates with you, what feels good, and how you're really starting to key into, how does this make me feel? When I think about writing a spreadsheet, how do I feel? If you feel
got
horrible, there's another way of doing it that will work better for your brain.
yeah. I love a mind map.
There
I
we
I
go.
I'd love
Absolutely.
I'd love to mind map my whole life. I use mind mapping primarily for my, studies because it's just
Brilliant. Yeah,
yeah, it's just an amazing tool to use because you just dump all your ideas and
exactly. It all just gets dumped down, and then from there, you can take a little bit of it and you
yeah,
can mind map that bit. And you can, it doesn't matter what your process is. If it gets you to where you want to go, that's the most important thing. Who cares about anybody else?
and also as well, I sometimes go a bit retro and write handwritten notes in different
Yeah.
coloured pens, or
Yeah.
have different coloured post-it notes, and it's just things that like, I am very visual, but I'm also very, I prefer to communicate verbally than written because I just struggle with
Yeah.
written words and stuff,
Yeah.
and it's just trying to
Yeah.
find what works best for any of you that are listening today. And you don't have to have ADHD. This works for neurotypical people as well. So
Exactly. And it's about
yes.
trying, isn't it, Emma? Try it. If it doesn't work, don't stick with it. Do something for as long as it works. And then if it doesn't work anymore, do something else. forcing ourselves into continuing to do tasks and patterns that are no longer helpful and no longer feel easeful is one of the biggest causes of stress. And then when we feel stressed, everything gets worse. So it's looking at all the really tiny, fine details, particularly if you have neurodiversity, those tiny, fine little details, like you said about the post-it notes and the mind mapping, they're the fabric of your life. That's what will make the difference between you doing something and not doing it, starting at the lowest level.
Just create the mind map, get going, honestly.
Exactly.
There is free software that you can get. The mind mapping tool that I was given was through DSA. It's called Mind View, but people can they can pay for it if they want. But yeah, I just love it because you can create like it's just for me, it's just the easiest way. And then
And it's
when
creative and it's playful, it's keeping something playful rather than it being all really dull and boring and grey and black and white, keeping something really playful. Like one of my clients with ADHD loves Trello boards. I don't know if you've ever heard of those, but he absolutely loves it because he writes everything down on his Trello boards. He can break it into little tiny sections. And then he said if something springs into his mind and he has a bit of a panic, he thinks it's okay. I've written it on the Trello board. So it immediately lowers that stress because for him, that feels playful. It feels, like he can just go off on little tangents. And that's what works for him. Might not work for other people, but he's tried things and found a thing that feels nice for him.
yeah. And that's it, isn't it? It's just giving things a go and seeing what works and what doesn't work and, just focusing on what does work. And yeah, for me, the mind mapping is just amazing because I can export it into a Word document. So then I've got like a rough plan for my assignments and stuff. So yeah, it's just because for me, the biggest challenge that I've had with academia and studying is starting the academic writing. So just looking at a
Yes.
blank Word document is just like
Yeah.
stare at it for hours. So I think the mind mapping, I export it and it's not fully written, but I've got bullet points so I know what needs to go where and and it's just easier. That's just how
Yeah.
I do that.
Yeah.
It just
'Cause
makes it and
it gives you dopamine quickly. We've
exactly.
got to remember we've got to give our brain a reward really quickly, which is why with my clients, we're looking at small steps. Because if the goal's too big, your brain just checks out and goes, "Oh, let's just watch Netflix."
Yeah.
And then, as you know, Emma, with somebody with ADHD, if your brain checks out from what it's supposed to be doing, Lord knows in 3 hours you could have driven to the other side of the country to buy a wardrobe because it could
Yeah.
take you anywhere. So those really tiny first steps are so important for someone with ADHD so that they can grab onto it straight away and get some dopamine off it immediately. Because otherwise, who knows where you'll end up.
Exactly. Definitely don't do a deep clean in your bedroom and get everything out the cupboards because you'll regret it.
I can fully imagine that scene. It's playing out in front of me right now, yeah, absolutely. When me and my husband were clearing out the loft, I said to him, "You can bring 5 things down, and then we deal with those 5 things, and
Yeah.
then we once that process is done, then you can go back in the loft."
Yeah.
'Cause he was going up there and he was getting on all sorts of different projects. I said, "No, no, no, we're not focusing on that today. We
Yeah.
just do the 5 things," because at that time, I knew that if I let him go off on his side quest, it actually would become distressing, and he
Yeah.
wouldn't achieve the thing he'd set out to do. So, sometimes it doesn't matter, but other times it's so helpful to just have a way of reining yourself back in, whether that's co-regulation with someone else or, having some kind of list that you're working off.
Yeah. Amazing, amazing. So
Brilliant.
I am aware of the time because I do know that your time is limited because we had technical issues. So I
That's
just wanted to
okay.
say a huge thank you, Kira, to you for taking the time, for being patient with me, and for taking the time to come and talk to me today. And hopefully the listeners have got something out of our conversation. I will post the links to all of your networks and your website in the description of
Brilliant.
the podcast. And yeah, for today, Kira, it's been an absolute pleasure. So
Me
thank you
too.
so
Thank
much
you,
for your
Emma.
time.